She was pretty, a light skin, brown, honey colored skin. And she was about tall, she was tall for a woman, about 5'8", 5'9", and it's beautiful shape, and she's friendly.
And how much do you think she weighed?
She had a beautiful body, a beautiful 150, well put together.
And how old do you think she was?
She was about 30.
Okay, and she's a black female.
Yeah.
And tell me where you met her.
I met her in a nightclub in New Orleans. Her and her sister she had two sisters. Her youngest sister was having a birthday party. Her sister was dancing with this guy on the floor. And when I come in, the girl that I was with offered me to dance with me. And while we were dancing, she says, you want to go riding after this, after this party's over? We walked outside and she looked and seen my car at Lincoln. She said, ooh, that's a beautiful car too. So she had arm in arm, walking to the car. We got in, stopped at the gas station. We were on the Highway 10 and going toward Slide Hill. I seen the sign say Little Woods. Mm-hmm. So I cut off, I took off the exit, went, and that sure enough was the road leading into the woods. And we went in and parked. So we finally got to where we were going, and it was by a bayou, a river, a little water thing, and the big, they had a machine out there in that little river.
Dredging?
Okay. I grabbed her by the legs and pulled her to the water. Mm-hmm. That's the only one that I ever killed by drowning.
Describe the location where she's left.
Okay, I left her with her head still in the water, half her body in the underwater, and her thighs and legs on the bank.
Samuel Little, a name that sends shivers down the spine of anyone who has heard of his heinous acts. Born on June 7, 1940, in Reynolds, Georgia, Little's early life was marked by instability and crime. His criminal activities began at a young age, with arrests for theft, assault, and fraud. But it was his later years that would reveal the true extent of his monstrous nature, a name whispered in hushed tones, often accompanied by a sense of dread and fear. Little's presence was like a dark cloud, casting a shadow over the lives of those who crossed his path. His victims, often women living on the fringes of society, were chosen for their vulnerability. They were people who, in many cases, had fallen through the cracks of the social safety net, making them easy targets for a predator like Little, a name synonymous with terror. Little's method of operation was chillingly methodical. He would often approach his victims in public places, offering them a ride or some form of assistance. Once they were in his car, they were at his mercy. His preferred method of killing was strangulation, a brutal and personal way to end a life. This method left little evidence, allowing him to evade capture for years. He holds a chilling title, America's most prolific serial killer. Despite his numerous arrests over the years, it wasn't until 2012 that Little was finally apprehended for good. Advances in DNA technology linked him to 3 murders in Los Angeles, leading to his conviction. But this was just the tip of the iceberg. Little would eventually confess to 93 murders, spanning across 19 states, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in U.S. history. With a staggering 93 confirmed victims, Little's reign of terror spanned decades, leaving a trail of heartbreak and unanswered questions in its wake. Each victim had a story, a life cut short by a man who showed no remorse for his actions. The sheer number of victims is a testament to the failure of the system to stop him sooner. Many of his victims were never reported missing, their disappearances unnoticed by a society that had already marginalized them. His crimes, often targeting society's most vulnerable, remained shrouded in mystery for years. Little's ability to evade capture was aided by his transient lifestyle. He moved from state to state, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. His victims were often women of color, sex workers, or those struggling with addiction. These were people who, in many cases, had little to no support system, making it easier for Little to prey on them without fear of immediate repercussions. Little's ability to evade capture, to blend in and continue his spree, is a chilling testament to the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface. He was a master manipulator, able to charm and deceive those around him. His confessions, given in a matter-of-fact tone, revealed a man who took pleasure in his ability to control and dominate his victims. He remembered details about each murder with chilling clarity, often sketching portraits of his victims from memory. This is the story of Samuel Little, a man whose name will forever be etched in the annals of criminal history. His life and crimes serve as a grim reminder of the evil that can exist in the world, and the importance of vigilance and justice in protecting the most vulnerable among us. As we delve deeper into his story, we uncover not just the details of his crimes but also the systemic failures that allowed him to continue his reign of terror for so long. This is a story of darkness, but also of the light that eventually brought him to justice. Samuel Little's life of crime began long before his murder spree. His journey into the dark underbelly of society was a gradual descent, marked by a series of increasingly violent acts. From a young age, Little exhibited a troubling propensity for violence and a complete disregard for the law. His early brushes with the law were just the beginning of a long and sordid criminal career that would span decades and leave a trail of devastation in its wake. Born in 1940, Little's early years were marked by instability and neglect. His childhood was far from idyllic, growing up in a broken home where love and care were in short supply. His mother, a teenage prostitute, was often absent, leaving him in the care of his grandmother. This lack of a stable family environment contributed to his feelings of abandonment and anger, emotions that would later fuel his criminal activities. The streets of Lorain, Ohio became his playground, and it wasn't long before he found himself in trouble with the law. Raised by his grandmother in Lorain, Ohio, he quickly turned to petty theft and violence. The small town, with its industrial backdrop and struggling economy, offered little in the way of opportunities for a young boy with no guidance. Little's early criminal activities were a cry for attention, a desperate attempt to assert control over his chaotic life. He started with minor thefts, but his actions soon escalated to more serious offenses. The local authorities were well aware of his antics, but their interventions did little to curb his growing appetite for crime. His criminal record, starting in his teens, grew to encompass a litany of charges: robbery, assault, rape. Each arrest added another layer to his already extensive rap sheet. Despite numerous incarcerations, Little showed no signs of reform. Instead, his time behind bars seemed to harden him, making him more cunning and ruthless. He learned to navigate the criminal justice system, often slipping through the cracks due to lack of evidence or procedural errors. His ability to evade long-term imprisonment only emboldened him further. Each arrest, each conviction, seemed to do little to deter Little. The revolving door of the justice system became a familiar routine for him. He would serve his time, only to return to the streets and resume his criminal activities. His encounters with the law were mere inconveniences, temporary setbacks in his relentless pursuit of power and control. The authorities, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of his offenses, struggled to keep him off the streets. Little's ability to manipulate and intimidate those around him made him a formidable adversary. Instead, his crimes escalated, foreshadowing the darkness that would soon consume him. The petty thefts and assaults of his youth gave way to more heinous acts. Little's violent tendencies grew more pronounced and his methods more brutal. He began to target vulnerable individuals, those who would not be missed or whose disappearances would not raise immediate alarms. His ability to blend into the shadows, to strike without warning, made him a ghostly figure, a predator lurking in the night. The escalation of his crimes was a clear indication of the monstrous path he was on. Little drifted across state lines, a predator in the shadows, leaving a trail of broken lives in his wake. His transient lifestyle made it difficult for law enforcement to track his movements. He would commit a crime in one state and then disappear, only to resurface in another. This nomadic existence allowed him to evade capture and continue his reign of terror. The scattered nature of his crimes made it challenging for authorities to connect the dots, to see the pattern of violence that spanned across the country. Little's ability to remain elusive only added to the fear and uncertainty that surrounded him. Samuel Little preyed on the vulnerable, the marginalized, those often overlooked by society, those who had no one to protect them. Drug addicts, sex workers, transient individuals, these were the targets of his brutal and calculated crimes. Little used his imposing physique and charm to lure his victims, often promising them drugs or money or a way out. He would gain their trust, disarm them with feigned kindness, before unleashing his brutality in the dead of night. Little's weapon of choice was his bare hands, strong and unyielding. He strangled his victims, relishing their terror, their fading life, and their helplessness. His crimes were deeply personal, fueled by a perverse sense of power and control over his victims. Samuel Little was a master manipulator, a man who could charm his way into anyone's life and then disappear without a trace. His ability to blend into the background was almost supernatural, making him a ghost in the eyes of law enforcement. He was a chameleon who blended seamlessly into the fringes of society. Little's life was a series of calculated moves, each one designed to keep him one step ahead of the authorities. He had an uncanny ability to change his appearance and adopt new identities, making it nearly impossible for anyone to track him. He drifted from town to town, state to state, always staying just out of reach. He drifted from town to town, state to state, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. Little's transient lifestyle, coupled with the nature of his victims, made it difficult for law enforcement to connect the dots. His victims were often vulnerable women, people who lived on the margins of society and whose disappearances were less likely to be noticed, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. Little's transient lifestyle, coupled with the nature of his victims, made it difficult for law enforcement to connect the dots. His victims were often vulnerable women, people who lived on the margins of society and whose disappearances were less likely to be noticed. He preyed on those who were least likely to be missed, ensuring that his crimes would go undetected for as long as possible. Coupled with the nature of his victims, made it difficult for law enforcement to connect the dots. His crimes often went unreported or were misclassified, hindering any potential investigation. Many of his victims were women who lived on the fringes of society, people whose disappearances were less likely to be noticed. This made it easier for Little to continue his killing spree without attracting attention. Made it difficult for law enforcement to connect the dots. His crimes often went unreported or were misclassified, hindering any potential investigation. Many of his victims were women who lived on the fringes of society, people whose disappearances were less likely to be noticed. This made it easier for Little to continue his killing spree without attracting attention. Detectives struggled to piece together the puzzle, often working with limited information and resources. His crimes often went unreported or were misclassified, hindering any potential investigation. Little's ability to evade capture for so long is a chilling reminder of the challenges faced by law enforcement in tracking down these predators. His crimes often went unreported or were misclassified, hindering any potential investigation. Little's ability to evade capture for so long is a chilling reminder of the challenges faced by law enforcement in tracking down these predators. His crimes often went unreported or were misclassified, hindering any potential investigation. Little's ability to evade capture for so long is a chilling reminder of the challenges faced by law enforcement in tracking down these predators. He moved like a phantom, always one step ahead, leaving a legacy of fear and uncertainty in his wake. His ability to stay ahead of the authorities for so long is a testament to his cunning and resourcefulness. He was always one step ahead, always just out of reach. He moved like a phantom, always one step ahead, leaving a legacy of fear and uncertainty in his wake. His ability to stay ahead of the authorities for so long is a testament to his cunning and resourcefulness. He was always one step ahead, always just out of reach. His ability to stay ahead of the authorities for so long is a testament to his cunning and resourcefulness. He was always one step ahead, always just out of reach, leaving a legacy of fear and uncertainty in his wake. His ability to stay ahead of the authorities for so long is a testament to his cunning and resourcefulness. He was always one step ahead, always just out of reach. His ability to stay ahead of the authorities for so long is a testament to his cunning and resourcefulness. He was always one step ahead, always just out of reach. His ability to stay ahead of the authorities for so long is a testament to his cunning and resourcefulness. He was always one step ahead, always just out of reach.